Welcome, everybody, to a special edition of All In with Art Stapleton, a New York Giants podcast brought to you by NorthJersey.com and The Record. I'm your host, Art Stapleton, and the joint practices are over between the Giants and Jets. Focus now turns to Saturdays, formerly known as the Snoopy Bowl at MetLife Stadium. Giants are the hosts, but we're going to give you a rundown of everything that took place today in day two of these joint practice sessions. Obviously, day one was in the books down in Florham Park, and now everything came up here to MetLife Stadium, or at least the shadow of MetLife Stadium, where the Giants have their practice facility, the Quest Diagnostics Training Center. All right, so let's dive right in, and I think overall the story for the Giants on the defensive side of the ball is the emergence of Brian Burns as the player he's being paid to be. And it's very interesting because I think overall, if you're naming a player of the joint practices on any side of the ball for either team, I think everyone would be in agreement it was Brian Burns. I mean, he worked over the Jets' tackles today, just like he did yesterday. And, you know, it was interesting. I had the story on Burns last week. If you haven't seen it, please check it out on NorthJersey.com. It was about Brian Burns' approach and where he stands in practice and what that means and how much he wants to be a leader on this team. And what's interesting is that he talked today about how he's met with Dexter Lawrence, and they've talked about using his body more, using his body movements, and not just from an athletic perspective. And it was interesting to see Burns talk about what Dex has taught him about how he views his position at nose/defensive tackle, and how Burns is trying to pick up on that. And, you know, Burns essentially admitted after practice that, you know, I want to take my game to a place it's never been. And if you're the New York Giants and you see everything from Brian Burns that you've seen, and you're just waiting for that production, now you drop him into a lineup where he's not a secondary player by any stretch, but a lot of the focus has been on Dexter Lawrence and Abdul Carter, and rightfully so. But if Brian Burns can be a frontline player, and again, it's only two practices, and it's been 3.5 weeks of training camp. But if Brian Burns can become a Pro Bowl caliber player, where you're talking about somebody who is now having to be put your homework against. You need to guard against him every single week. You need to circle number 0 for your team. What do you think that's going to do for number 97 in the middle? For number 5, Kayvon Thibodeau on the outside, and for number 51, who's floating basically, as I've written several times now, a lion stalking its prey up and down the offensive line of the opposition. So, again, I thought Brian Burns has really taken a step forward here. It would surprise me that in 2 weeks, if Brian Burns does not have a C on his chest, I think he really has emerged as a leader on this defensive team with a lot of talent, a lot of star power. And I think there are leaders on this team other than Brian Burns. But the players gravitate to Burns, and you can see that. And I think that says a lot about what he's been able to do from year 1 to year 2 here with the Giants. And I think, as I tweeted, I guess it was the beginning of last week or maybe even a week earlier, is that I'm just surprised. I think the Giants fan overall doesn't have an appreciation for Brian Burns, and it's all tied into statistics and production, and they're not really worried about the analytical perspective and what people talk about pass rush rate. And, you know, the average fan is not focusing in on pass rush rate. It's tell me how many sacks he has, I'll tell you if he's a good player or not. And Burns was the top 5 in the NFL last year in pass rush win rate. So there's a lot to like about who Brian Burns is, not only who he is now. I know people get caught up in the contract that he signed when he was traded here, but just as a player, you watch him, he's gifted athletically, but he seems to have really put his mind on taking his game to another level. And I think it's really been fun to watch. So Brian Burns, Justin Fields is going to have nightmares of Brian Burns over the next week or so because what Burns was able to do against this Jets offensive line, which was ranked in the top 5 by some of these national polls the last couple weeks, that the Jets offensive line was going to be very good, and they are good. But just look at what the Giants were able to do. Everywhere you turn today for the Giants, it was sack, loss, Justin Fields scramble, because the Giants defense was just that good up front. So the other thing for Brian Burns, and it keys into Abdul Carter, funny scene after practice. Now, we knew we were getting Brian Burns, Abdul Carter, and Jackson Dart at the podium. I believe the quarterbacks and the rookies were signing for fans today, so Jackson Dart was going to be later. So Burns and Carter both came in, and it had to be something that they were joking about prior to coming to the interview session inside the field house. And all of a sudden, Abdul Carter, you kind of see him like sprinting up to the podium. And it was one of those things where you didn't realize, okay, what was happening. And then Burns came and essentially bumped him off, called seniority, and said he was doing his podium first. Carter had to go sit down. He went and sat down next to Marcus Bowe, who I talked to, and I'll get to that in a second. And it was just kind of funny. Carter just kind of shrugged and walked off, knew his role in terms of seniority, but that won't be happening to Abdul Carter much longer as soon as he starts producing in games that actually count. So just thought it was a funny story between Burns and Carter, and I was actually going to lead that with my story today, so share that with you here, and then that'll be a story that I'll end up writing and posting on NorthJersey.com later on today. So that was the defense. No Tay Banks, so Cordell Flott was out there. Giants gave several guys opportunities to be at that second corner spot. Flott is still easing back into the role. CJ Moore was there towards the end of practice, so it'll be interesting to see if he's going to be playing on the outside on Saturday. But overall, a good performance for the Giants defense. Now let's flip fields. As we had in Florham Park for the most of the practice, the defense and the offense operate on separate fields. That's Giants defense versus Jets offense. That's on the main field next to the grandstand, the bleachers. And then today, the Giants offense versus the Jets defense were closest to the field house. I spent most of my time there. And really, I think the player that gained the most over the last 2 days here, and the player that I was most impressed with, was Marcus Bowe, rookie offensive lineman, 5th rounder today. Congratulations are in order to Jermaine Illuminor and his wife. They welcomed their second child overnight. So Illuminor was not here at practice today. So that meant an opportunity for Marcus Bowe. Marcus Bowe, instead of flipping back and forth between right tackle with the second team, left tackle, and left tackle for the third team, he was now right tackle exclusively for the first team today. And I think he held up well. I really do. I like his footwork. And he showed a little edge today. There were fireworks in one team period. It was really around the 30-yard line going in. And one of the Jets tackled Tyrone Tracy on a run. Now, in the Jets' defense, the Jets tackle to the ground in a lot of their practices. The Giants only thud, which means you hit them and then you let them go. So it's a fine line. You know, you should be able to know the difference between tackling a guy and thudding a guy. But I almost give a pass for the physicality. You're trying to bring the physicality. And I think the Giants need that too. So it was an interesting play. Bo and Greg Van Roten both took offense to Will McDonald hitting Tyrone Tracy. So really, it looked in a scrum, looked like Marcus Bo came and gave a Lou Thesz press, stunning Steve Austin, Stone Cold Steve Austin, tells you, showing my wrestling knowledge. It was a very interesting thing. And then off to the side, Quantez Stiggers for the Jets and John Runyon, it kind of were ready to throw down. It was kind of funny, and I think Runyon was almost like, dude, you're a DB. Like, I'm an offensive lineman. I got you in size, weight, and strength. You want to throw down, let's go, but you're not going to like what happens. And I think, cooler heads prevailed. Everybody got pulled off. And then the next play, Russell Wilson hit a big touchdown pass to Beau Collins. So Beau Collins, again, running with the first team, something to keep an eye on. When you're doing those roster projections, there's a reason why Beau Collins has been in my roster projection even when he was out last week. So I'd say Marcus Bo in this situation is someone to really keep an eye on. Now, I'm not talking about Marcus Bo all of a sudden replacing Jermaine Illuminor at right tackle. Now, you do have to look at it. Is Andrew Thomas going to be back? I still have not heard anything to think that he won't be back for week 1. But if they do run into an issue, is Marcus Bo somebody you want to put at left tackle and say, you know what, we're going to have Hudson be our swing tackle, let Bo be our starting left tackle? It's not a scenario that the Giants want to think about right now. But if by some chance Andrew Thomas is not out there, then I think you have to think about putting Marcus Bo there. Like I said, I love his technique. I like his athleticism. It's interesting. I asked Bo afterwards, and I'll have a story. He's going to lead the rookie report this week. So I'll have that coming out either tomorrow or Friday. I asked him afterwards, I said, when you come into the league as an offensive lineman, unless you're a top 5 pick or top 10 pick, most of the time people say you're an athlete who needs to refine his technique, or you're a technician who has to play better in space. Now, the elite of the elite have both. So I asked Marcus Bo that, and I said, what do you lean on more? And I know from having done research on him in the offseason that he's a former basketball player. In high school, he was really good in basketball. To the point where I joked with him after our interview, the Giants have a hoop in the field house that guys just kind of shoot around on. It's on the field turf, so it's no real dribbling. And I asked him, does he ever get the bug to go over there? And he goes, absolutely. At OTAs, I'd go over there and put up some shots. He said, but, my days as a hoop star are over. But Bo, I thought, was interesting. He said, you've got to have both to be at a high level as an offensive lineman in this league. He said, you can't win on athleticism in this league, at offensive tackle especially. He said, because people will technique you to death and they'll hit you with moves. I think of Abdul Carter. He's hitting guys, setting guys up for their athleticism. Doesn't matter how athletic you are. Carter is A, more athletic, but B, he's more refined in his skill set. And Bo said it's really got to be about technique. He said his footwork, a lot of it comes from the work he's put in, but also his natural ability as a basketball player. So he said he'd probably lean on his technique more than he does his athleticism. It's almost a recovery aspect from an athletic point of view. Can you be athletic enough if you get beat at the point of attack? Can you recover athletically? And so far, Bo's shown me that he can. And it's been a very fun watch, especially the last 2 days, but really over the course of camp, because you're talking about, and Jackson Dart talked about this after practice. Jackson Dart said, look, Bo has started off with the third team in the start of camp. And now, 2 weeks into the preseason, getting ready for preseason game number 2, not only did he play really well in week 1 of the preseason against the Bills on both sides of the line, today he steps up into the starting right tackle spot and does well. Now, he wasn't perfect. The Giants-Jets offensive-defensive line one-on-ones, at least the Jets defensive line, Giants offensive line, which is what I watched. Bo had his battles. I mean, he battled Will McDonald, who's a good player. I mean, you're talking about he's looked at as a double-digit sack guy for the Jets. He's their best pass rusher. If Jermaine Johnson comes back, then they have two. Jermaine Johnson right now just came off of the PUP list, so we're waiting to see, how good Jermaine Johnson can be coming off that Achilles injury. But again, I'd say Brian Burns and Marcus Bowe, and old school Giants fans will look at that and go, two guys in the trenches, you got to love it. So we could talk about the quarterbacks. As far as offense, and here's where I'm at with the passing game. Yes, you need Andrew Thomas out there at left tackle. That's no question. But when this offense does not have Malik Nabers and Darius Slayton as a full-time pairing out there, and you're trotting out guys who are fighting to make the roster with Wan'Dale Robinson and Theo Johnson, this passing offense is going to struggle. So to me, if I'm Joe Schoen, number one, I have more inside information than Art Stapleton does in terms of where Malik Nabers is and where Darius Slayton is. So if they're just, Slayton worked in a little bit today on team drills, but I think they're being smart with him, making sure that they don't overexert anything. They're thin at receiver. I mean, they're unproven at receiver. So for me, I'm looking in the market. I am seriously thinking about Gabe Davis again. Jalen Hyatt came back today, but was only in positional drills and then worked with the training staff. I don't want to give up on Jalen Hyatt just yet, but if you're the Giants and you're realists, you need to get another experienced wide receiver in here. And I don't think there's any question. Now, I think there was a focus on the run game today. I think the Giants were definitely looking to establish the run. I think Tyrone Tracy and Motor Singletary looked very good with the first team. Motor yesterday and today. Tyrone's snaps have been limited a little bit. I think the Giants don't want him, running into the line 5 times in practice. That doesn't make any sense. Taking unnecessary hits. But I think Singletary's looked pretty good. Obviously, we're still awaiting Cam Scatterbo to come back, so we'll see when that is. But you have to put any thoughts on Scatterbo being a factor in Week 1 to the side right now. Let's see when he comes back. Does he get back into practice next week? And even if he gets back into practice, the game is on Thursday. So they're really not having a lot of practice next week, maybe Monday and Tuesday. And are you really going to push those guys in the third preseason game? We'll wait and see against the Patriots here at MetLife. So that's what I would say about the first team passing attack. Russell Wilson hit some shots. Yesterday's red zone work was good. It wasn't outstanding. It wasn't like you'd all of a sudden look. I mean, it was sloppy at times. There was some pressure. I mean, the Jets are a pretty good defensive front. So I think they needed to see what they need to see, but they need to clean it up big time. Jackson Dart, again, I think this was a step forward for him. Today didn't have the splash plays. I mean, that play to Zach Pascal yesterday, the catch was great, but also, as I've mentioned, you saw the way Brian Dable reacted with Jackson Dart afterwards. They loved that throw and that decision from Jackson Dart. Today, he had a long touchdown on the right side of the field. Now I've got to get my notebook, and I am going to, so I can remember who it was, because at this point, it was a great throw from Jackson Dart. And I think it was the one was to Beau Collins, and I'm trying to remember who the other one was. I think it was to Beau Collins also. But Jackson Dart's initial read, he said, was on the left-hand side of the field. So he read that was covered, went to the right, motioned for Beau Collins to go deep, and then hit him in stride. There was nobody on him. So Jackson Dart's moxie again in the pocket, his awareness, I think is underrated. And I think you've gotten a chance to see that over the next couple of days. Dart, does he get the start on Saturday? Is Russell Wilson and the first team offense going to be out there again? We'll see about that. But all I know is that Jackson Dart, the first time he was in MetLife Stadium was the Zach Bryan band concert last week, I think it was. So for Dart, he's excited to get in that stadium and see what it's like. The crowd today was great, Jets and Giants. And, it'll be interesting to see what Saturday is and what they decide coming out of the joint practices, how much the starters are going to see. One other note, Tyler Nubin looked like he was just getting tight, maybe cramping up today. It was brutal again today. The Heat was on the sideline, saw Nubin go over the stationary bike, and just from my experience watching, he looked like a guy who was trying to get loose. He was on the bike, pedaling really, really fast, trying to loosen up. He ended up not being on the field. And I think that was I'll get back to Nubin in a second. Paul Wood tells me, yes, it was Greg Dulcich. That was right. It was Dulcich on the opposite side. He was trying to go to Bo Collins on the left side. The Russell Wilson touchdown pass was to Bo Collins. And then Jackson Dart hit Greg Dulcich with a touchdown along the right side. It was a nice check with me on Jackson Dart's part. So thanks for Paul for the tip. But Nubin, I'm not too worried about Nubin. He was walking around. Didn't look like he was hurt or, it looked like maybe he had been tightening up. So we'll see what they say tomorrow. Whether he's out there on Saturday remains to be seen. But I would say probably a matter of hydrating and getting back out there and making sure there's nothing carrying over to where they're at. So a couple things at this point for the Giants. I'm looking at wide receiver, corner, someone who could challenge for that corner 2 spot, and an interior player on the offensive line. And I know Brandon Sheriff is still out there. I don't know what his health situation is. I don't know if he wants to play. But that is definitely somebody I would look at. I don't want to go into the year relying on guys that you don't know necessarily if you can count on. Aaron Stinney and Evan Neal and Jake Kubas. These guys, if you lose Greg Van Roten at right guard, I'm not sure if either one of those guys is ready to step up and meet that level. Right now, Greg Van Roten is probably, if you're ranking your starters and Andrew Thomas is out there, Greg Van Roten's probably 5 out of 5. It doesn't diminish him as a player, but he's older in the league. He's gritty. He played every snap last year, so he's durable. But if you can upgrade there behind him, you will. And I'm not sold 100% that Evan Neal is going to all of a sudden be a factor there, at least not right off the bat in this regular season when it gets going on September 7th. And the other spot that I think I said interior corner. Look, I would place I'd place some calls to see where guys are at free agent wise. I want to see, Asante Samuel Jr., where is he? I know he's more of a zone corner, but that may fit this defense. And, I know he's not really a big tackler, but the Giants want that from their guys on the outside. I would make a call there to see how healthy is he. I know he's coming off a neck injury, so that's obviously of utmost importance to find out. And then as far as wide receiver, Gabe Davis is the name that keeps coming up for me. I mentioned Amari Cooper. I just think the Giants need to add to this room. I think they are going to lean more on the running game early on in the year, but I do think it scares me if I'm a front office person here. If Malik Neighbors is not on the field and Darius Slayton's not on the field, where's this passing game going? You don't have any threats other than Theo Johnson, and Wan'Dale Robinson still has to prove that he can be a downfield threat. So that's where I'm at. Coming out of the joint practices, we'll have some stories over the next couple days. Like I said, Brian Burns story, the Marcus Bowe story, have something on Jackson Dart going into Saturday. The rookie report will be Marcus Bowe. And then, as far as wide receiver, And then we will be there on Saturday. Giants, Jets. It's a far cry from where they were with Rex Ryan and Tom Coughlin in the Snoopy Bowl. But we'll be right there from player arrivals at the stadium. Check out TikTok and Instagram. And then all the way through the game on Saturday night, 7 o'clock. Your boy will be there. I'll be there. We'll be all in. So appreciate K12 as always, repping the guys. So thanks, Paul Wood and friends, for the hat. And that's it. We appreciate you being all in. Thanks for following along on our live blogs from the joint practices. And check out my story on Abdul Carter if you haven't read it yet. That column that I wrote, put a lot of work into it. I think you guys will enjoy it. It's a little bit long. It's got some length to it. So give yourself some time to read it. And that's where we're at. So we'll be back post-game Saturday night if we can work it out. If not, we'll get a post-game after the fact with myself and Paul Wood doing the show. So again, for Paul Wood, I'm Art Stapleton. We appreciate you being all in. We'll see you on Saturday at MetLife and the Snoopy Bowl, Jets, Giants.